The honourable member for Don Valley West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm delighted today that I'll be sharing my time with the member from York Centre. Mr. Speaker, there is no liberty without security. This is a principle that is fundamental to accept when we are discussing this important bill before us today. I want to bring this debate back to first principles. We must make sure that Canadians are protected from terrorism. The security of a country is the first responsibility of any government. Let's not beat around the bush. The international jihadi movement has declared war on Canada and our allies. We have seen it in Paris, we've seen it in Copenhagen, we have seen it in Sydney, we've seen it in Quebec, and we've seen it right here in Ottawa. In fact, just as recently as Sunday night, 2 jihadi terrorists tried to attack a free speech convention in Dallas. Mr. Speaker, these jihadi terrorists want to kill every single Westerner. Every Canadian is on their hit list. They hate us for our freedom, our tolerance, and our prosperity. We need not go any further than the source to know that this is true. A spokesman for the so-called Islamic State said, and I quote, "If you can kill a disbelieving American or European, especially the spiteful and filthy French or an Australian or a Canadian or any other disbeliever from the disbelievers waging war, including the citizens of the countries that entered into a coalition against the Islamic State, then rely upon Allah and kill him in any manner or way, however it may be," end of quote. Mr. Speaker, that should send chills down the spine of every member of this House. What's more, spreading this type of jihadist propaganda in Canada is not currently illegal under the current law. That is why we've brought forward changes in this legislation to more effectively target the material which is used to recruit Canadians to go to join terrorist groups like the so-called Islamic State. The talking point for opposition members of this House today seems to be that there are no examples of things that would be crimes under this bill that are not crimes now. I would take note that this type of hateful propaganda is exactly what it is meant to be targeted. Let's listen to the experts. Here is what Salim Mansour, a professor at Western University, had to say. Quote, "Bill C-51, in my reading, is not designed to turn Canada into some version of Hobbes's Leviathan or Orwell's 1984, despite at times the fevered imagination of its critics," end of quote. Let's take a look at the 5 key measures that this bill will actually do. It will allow Passport Canada to share information on potential terrorist travelers with the RCMP. It will stop known radicalized individuals from boarding a plane bound for a terrorist conflict zone. It will criminalize the promotion of terrorism in general. For example, statements like, quote, "kill all the infidels wherever they are," end of quote, would become illegal, as I have already discussed. It will allow CSIS agents to speak with parents of radicalized youth in order to disrupt terrorist travel plans. And it will give the government an appeal mechanism to stop information from being released in security certificate proceedings if it could harm a source. Mr. Speaker, if we put aside the heated rhetoric and the misinformation that is out there, and we focus purely on the facts, we can see that this is a common-sense bill that protects Canadians. I fail to see the reasons members on the other side of the House would fail to support the bill. Let's take a minute to examine the ideology. We have seen before that the NDP has taken every possible step to stop our Conservative government from improving our national security. They voted against making it a crime to travel abroad to engage in terrorism. They voted against stripping citizenship from those convicted of terrorism. And they have voted against any new resources for our frontline law enforcement and national security officers. It seems as though they're fundamentally opposed to any measure that will add to the protection of Canadians. This is the same party that had, as part of their election platform, promised to repeal all national security legislation. And, Mr. Speaker, we have seen from the Liberal Party that they simply do not take these discussions seriously. Their position on the bill is unintelligible. They will repeal it. They support it. No one really knows for certain, although we just heard from the last speaker that they plan to support the bill. Clearly, it is only our government who is able to make the tough decisions that are necessary in this very uncertain world. We will never waver from our commitment to taking strong actions to keep Canadians safe, particularly from jihadi terrorists. We will do so through legislation such as we're discussing today. And we will also do so through financial resources like the nearly $300 million that we have invested in the fight against terrorism through Economic Action Plan 2015. As I said at the beginning of my comments, Mr. Speaker, we must bring this back to the first principle, the desire to keep Canadians safe. The international jihadist movement has declared war on Canada. Canadians are being targeted by jihadi terrorists simply because these terrorists hate our society and the values it represents. Jihadi terrorism is not a human right. It is an act of war. That is why our government has put forward measures that protect Canadians against jihadi terrorists who seek to destroy the very principles that make Canada the best country in the world in which to live. That is also why Canada is not sitting on the sidelines, as some would have us do, and it is instead joining our allies in supporting the international coalition against the fight against, or in the fight against ISIS. I urge all of my colleagues on both sides of the House to support this bill. It's an important bill, and we need to see it enacted to legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.